The holographic star map flickered in the council chamber as High Commander Draxus traced a finger through empty space. 3 new colonies had appeared in what the Galactic Confederation considered their expansion zone. The species responsible called themselves humans, and their audacity in claiming systems so close to Confederation borders demanded a response. They arrived 6 months ago, Intelligence Officer Rella said, pulling up data streams that painted a picture of rapid colonization. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Chemical rockets for planetary landing, fusion drives that barely achieve 0.2 light speed, and their largest vessel carries fewer than 300 individuals. War Minister Galvin leaned forward, his scaled hands gripping the edge of the display table. 300. Our troop carriers hold 10,000. This will be the shortest campaign in Confederation history. Around the circular chamber, 23 council members from 15 different worlds nodded in agreement. Their species had achieved faster-than-light travel 3,000 years ago. They had refined warfare into an elegant science of overwhelming force and minimal casualties on their side. These humans, still wet behind whatever appendages they possessed, would surrender after one demonstration of Confederation might. There is something unusual in the environmental data, Rella continued, bringing up a blue-green planet labeled Earth. Their homeworld registers as Class 12 on the Habitability Index. Draxus waved dismissively. We are here to discuss military strategy, not planetary classifications. What are their defensive capabilities? Limited, Galvin answered with confidence. Kinetic weapons, primitive energy shields, and combat tactics that rely on individual ship maneuvers rather than proper fleet coordination. Our projections suggest complete victory within 2 weeks. Rella opened her mouth to say more about the environmental data, but Draxus had already moved on. The Council voted unanimously to authorize military action. Galvin would lead 300 warships to remove the human presence from Confederation space. The meeting adjourned with the same certainty that had preceded dozens of successful campaigns against species who failed to respect Confederation borders. 2 weeks later, Galvin's fleet materialized at the edge of the New Horizon system, the human colony. Orbited a pleasant yellow star, its settlements visible on the 4th planet's surface. Scans showed 26 human vessels in orbit, most of them civilian transports with minimal weaponry. The colony itself housed approximately 40,000 humans spread across 3 cities and various agricultural settlements. Open a communication channel, Galvin ordered from his command deck. Let us offer them the chance to surrender before we demonstrate our superiority. The human response came within minutes. A middle-aged male with graying hair and worn features appeared on screen. He wore a simple uniform with the designation Admiral Harris stitched above his heart. This is Admiral Harris of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You are approaching sovereign human territory. State your intentions. Galvin allowed himself a thin smile. I am War Minister Galvin of the Galactic Confederation. Your species has established colonies in space we have designated for our own expansion. Evacuate your settlements immediately or face military action. Harris studied Galvin for a long moment. Something in the human's eyes suggested he was evaluating rather than intimidating, measuring rather than fearing. You should have studied us more carefully. The channel closed before Galvin could respond. He gestured sharply at his tactical officer. Begin the attack. Target their orbital vessels first, then move to ground positions. Minimize damage to infrastructure so we can claim it intact. The Confederation fleet advanced in perfect formation, their weapons powering up with the hum of sophisticated energy systems. The human ships moved to intercept, but their positioning seemed chaotic individual vessels operating without clear coordination, exactly as projected. The first exchange of fire shattered those projections. Human ships accelerated directly into Confederation weapons range, closing distance at velocities that forced impossible maneuvers. One human frigate took 3 direct hits that should have disabled its engines, but continued firing, its hull trailing atmosphere and debris while its weapons remained active. Another vessel executed a gravity-assisted turn that pulled 9G acceleration, a maneuver that would have liquefied most Confederation species, but apparently left the human crew functional. "Their ships are damaged but not disabled," Galvin's tactical officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "They are absorbing punishment that should have destroyed them." Worse, the human weapons proved devastatingly effective at close range. While Confederation doctrine emphasized maintaining safe distance and using superior shielding to outlast opponents, humans closed to knife-fighting range where their simpler kinetic weapons punched through shields designed to dissipate energy beams. 3 Confederation cruisers listed out of formation, their shields collapsed and hulls breached. The human vessels responsible were equally damaged, but somehow still fighting. It defied all tactical logic. "Deploy ground forces," Galvin ordered, trying to regain control of a battle that had already cost more ships than anticipated. "The colonists will be easier to manage than these suicidal pilots." Dropships descended through atmospheric friction, carrying 2,000 Confederation soldiers toward the largest human city. They expected frightened civilians and perhaps a small militia. Instead, they found a population that refused to evacuate despite advance warnings, and armed resistance that appeared at every street corner. Squad leader Torin led his unit through an industrial district, following protocols designed for peaceful occupation. When his squad entered a warehouse to secure it as a staging area, humans attacked from concealed positions. They used improvised explosives, hunting weapons, and tools converted into instruments of violence. Torin watched his second-in-command fall, struck by a projectile weapon that punched through standard armor. The soldier would survive, but required immediate medical evacuation. In 37 previous campaigns across 2 decades of service, Torin had never seen a civilian population fight with such intensity. "Fall back to the landing zone," came the order from command. "Regroup and advance with heavy support." As Torin's unit retreated, carrying their wounded, he glimpsed something that would haunt him. A human colonist, struck by plasma fire that had seared through her leg, still dragged herself toward a weapon. She should have been unconscious from shock and pain. Instead, she aimed with steady hands at his retreating squad. High above the planet, Admiral Harris watched the battle unfold from his damaged flagship. Around him, crew members worked at stations despite injuries that would have hospitalized any Confederation citizen. His tactical officer had a broken arm, stabilized in a quick-seal cast, but remained at her post. The weapons officer was coordinating fire despite a concussion that made him squint at his displays. "They expected us to break," Harris said quietly. "They have no idea what breaking actually requires." The battle for New Horizon continued for 3 more days. When Confederation forces finally secured the colony, they had lost 42 ships and taken 7,000 casualties. A campaign projected to last 2 weeks and cost minimal losses had become the bloodiest engagement in recent Confederation history. In his command ship, War Minister Galvin stared at casualty reports that made no sense. His forces had superior technology, numbers, and training. Yet humans had fought like cornered predators, accepting casualties that should have shattered their will to resist. During interrogation, a captured human soldier, wounded and exhausted but somehow still conscious despite sedatives that should have dropped him hours ago, smiled at his captors. "You really don't know what kind of world we come from, do you?" Galvin found intelligence officer Rella and gave her a direct order. "Tell me everything about Earth, everything." Rella worked through the night, compiling data that should have been reviewed before any military action. The environmental analysis of Earth sat in her archive files, flagged as unusual, but never fully examined by command staff eager to focus on technology assessments and military capabilities. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Earth registered as a Class 12 world on the habitability scale, a designation reserved for planets that actively tried to kill their inhabitants. Most Confederation species evolved on Class 3 or 4 worlds, garden planets with stable climates, minimal weather variation, and ecosystems that developed in gentle balance. Earth was something else entirely. The gravity alone should have been prohibitive. At 1.5 times Confederation standard, every movement on Earth required additional effort. Humans had evolved carrying that extra weight with every step, building muscle and bone density that made them naturally stronger than species from lighter worlds. But gravity was just the beginning. Rella pulled up geological data and watched time-lapse recordings of Earth's surface. Massive cyclonic storms appeared regularly, spinning with wind velocities that could strip flesh from bone. The humans called them hurricanes, typhoons, and tornadoes, and they treated them as routine weather events. Volcanic eruptions released energy equivalent to multiple fusion bombs, yet human settlements existed near active volcanic zones. Earthquakes shattered cities, and humans simply rebuilt. The planet's climate swung between extremes. Ice ages had covered vast portions of the surface in glaciers kilometers thick, then retreated to leave behind fertile land that humans immediately colonized. Temperature variations across the planet ranged from -50 to +50 degrees Celsius. Humans lived in all of it. "This cannot be correct," War Minister Galvin said when Rella presented her findings to the remaining council members. "No sentient species could evolve under such conditions." "The data is verified through multiple sources," Rella replied, pulling up more files. "Including information from human databases we captured at New Horizon. They are quite proud of their world, actually. They have entire cultural traditions built around surviving its challenges." She showed them Earth's biological diversity. The planet hosted millions of species, thousands of which were apex predators that had evolved alongside human ancestors. Humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most dangerous creatures on their own world. They survived through intelligence, tool use, and a hunting technique that most species would consider insane. Persistence hunting, humans called it. They would select prey and simply follow it, not chase it down in a burst of speed, but track it relentlessly for hours, sometimes days. The prey would run, exhausting itself trying to escape. The humans would simply keep walking, maintaining a steady pace, never giving up. Eventually, the prey collapsed from exhaustion and the humans closed in for the kill. "They evolved as predators," Rella explained, "but not ambush predators like most species. They are endurance predators. They do not need to be the fastest or strongest. They just need to outlast everything else." Squad leader Torin, still recovering from injuries sustained at New Horizons, spoke up from his medical pod. "That explains the battle. We expected them to retreat when damaged. We expected their morale to break when they took casualties, but they just kept coming." Galvin studied the data with growing horror. What about their immune systems, disease resistance? Rella had anticipated that question. Earth hosts approximately 1 trillion different microorganism species. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites that evolved in constant warfare with each other and with larger organisms. Human immune systems develop to fight these threats continuously. They carry antibodies for pathogens that would kill most of us within hours. She showed them medical data from captured human prisoners. Their blood contained white cell counts triple that of average Confederation species. Their bodies produced antibodies at rates that seemed impossible. Minor infections that would hospitalize a Confederation citizen barely registered as inconvenient to humans. "There is more," Rella continued, though she hated adding to the Council's growing panic. "Human psychology. Most Confederation species evolved in environments where danger was minimal and survival was cooperative. Our fight-or-flight responses are designed to avoid predators through flight. Humans developed theirs while being both predator and prey." The psychological profiles painted a picture of a species that could switch between calm cooperation and explosive violence in seconds. Humans could suppress fear responses through training and willpower. They could function effectively while terrified, injured, or exhausted. Their ancestors had survived by fighting predators, competing with rival human groups and enduring environmental catastrophes that would have driven most species extinct. The Battle of New Horizon was not an anomaly, Rella concluded. It was humans fighting the way their evolution designed them to fight. They accepted casualties we would consider catastrophic because their species has survived worse. They fought while wounded because Earth taught them that injury does not mean defeat. They refused to surrender because surrender on Earth meant death. High Commander Draxus, attending the briefing remotely from his flagship, rejected the assessment entirely. This is defeatist thinking. They are still a primitive species with inferior technology. We will adapt our tactics and crush them with overwhelming force. With respect, Commander, Torin interjected, we already tried overwhelming force. They did not respond the way our models predicted. At New Horizon, I watched a human female continue fighting with injuries that should have been fatal. I saw civilians organize resistance using tools and equipment. In ways our tactical algorithms never anticipated. They think differently because their world forced them to. Galvin studied the Earth data one more time, focusing on the casualty projections Rella had calculated based on human capabilities. If they continued the war, Confederation losses would be catastrophic. Humans might have inferior technology, but they compensated with physical advantages, psychological resilience, and a complete willingness to accept losses that would break any other species' will to fight. We should negotiate, Galvin said quietly. Open diplomatic channels and establish boundaries. We can coexist with them without further conflict. Draxus's image on the view screen showed his contempt for that suggestion. We are the Galactic Confederation. We do not negotiate with primitives who refuse to respect our authority. I am taking direct command of the military campaign. We will show these Deathworlders what happens when lesser species challenge our supremacy. The transmission ended. Galvin looked at Rella with mounting dread. How long until humans respond to our invasion? Rella pulled up intelligence reports from human communication intercepts. The chatter was not encrypted, as if humans wanted the Confederation to hear. Admiral Harris was mobilizing forces from Earth itself, bringing ships and soldiers trained in environments that made New Horizon look hospitable. They have already begun, Rella said, and they are not coming to defend, they are coming to hunt. The holographic display showed human fleet movements. Multiple battle groups were departing from Earth's orbital facilities, each one larger than the force at New Horizon. But more disturbing were the personnel files Rella had intercepted. Human soldiers trained in Arctic conditions, desert warfare, jungle combat, and deep ocean operations. Every one of them had grown up on a world that tried to kill them daily. War Minister Galvin looked at the approaching human forces and finally understood what he was facing. Not just a species with different technology, but a species forged in conditions no Confederation world could replicate. Earth had not just produced survivors, it had produced hunters. And now those hunters were coming for them. Admiral Harris stood in the command center of the HCNS Perseverance, surrounded by screens showing fleet dispositions across 3-star systems. Behind him, tactical officers, coordinated with ship commanders who had trained in some of the harshest environments Earth offered. The raid on New Horizon had cost human lives, and Earth intended to respond with the full weight of a species that never forgot its debts. Confederation forces are consolidating near the Helios system, reported Lieutenant Commander Park, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. They expect us to meet them in open battle. Harris allowed himself a thin smile. Then we will disappoint them. Dispatch Hunter Group 7 to the radiation belt near Helios 3. Have Stalker Group 2 position near the stellar flares in the Acheron system, and send Ghost Group 5 through the asteroid field in Thanatos. Around the command center, officers executed orders that would have horrified Confederation tactical doctrine. Human ships moved deliberately into hazardous regions of space, positioning themselves in areas where Confederation sensors struggled, and their vessels could not safely operate. It was not the behavior of a species that fought fair. It was the behavior of predators using terrain to their advantage. In the Helios system, Confederation forces waited in perfect formation. Commander Draxus had assembled 200 warships in a defensive sphere, sensors sweeping space for the expected human attack. Standard tactical doctrine called for identifying the enemy, engaging at maximum range, and using superior shielding to outlast their weapons. The humans did not appear where sensors could detect them. Instead, the first attack came from within the radiation belt of Helios 3, a gas giant whose magnetic field generated particle storms that scrambled most detection systems. Human ships emerged from the chaos like sharks from murky water, their hulls scarred by radiation exposure that would have been considered unacceptable risk by Confederation standards. They fired in a coordinated strike, crippled 3 supply vessels, and vanished back into the radiation before Confederation forces could effectively respond. "They are using environmental hazards as cover," Draxus's tactical officer reported, his voice tight with frustration. "Our sensors cannot penetrate those regions effectively, and our ships would sustain damage if we followed." Draxus felt a cold understanding settle in his chest. On garden worlds where Confederation species evolved, dangerous environments were avoided. Doctrine emphasized maintaining safe conditions for crews and vessels, but humans had evolved in constant danger. They were comfortable in hostile environments because Earth had offered nothing else. In the Acheron system, Stalker Group 2 executed a similar strategy. They positioned near a star throwing massive solar flares, bursts of radiation and electromagnetic energy that played havoc with Confederation equipment. When a Confederation patrol entered the system, human ships attacked from the star side, using the flare activity to mask their approach until weapons range closed to distances that favored human kinetic weapons over Confederation energy systems. The human tactics were not elegant. They took damage, pushed their ships beyond recommended safety limits, and accepted risks that no Confederation commander would authorize. But they were devastatingly effective. Squad leader Torin found himself deployed again, this time defending a supply depot on an asteroid station. High Command had declared the position secure, protected by defensive installations and a full battalion of Confederation troops. Then human Marines arrived. They did not approach through normal docking ports. Instead, they breached the hull in 3 locations simultaneously, using cutting equipment that sprayed superheated metal fragments through interior corridors. The breach teams wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed for close-quarters combat. When they encountered Confederation defenders, they advanced through fire that would have forced any sane attacker to retreat. Torin watched a human Marine take a plasma shot to the shoulder, the kind of wound that should have incapacitated anyone. The human stumbled, cursed in a language Torin did not understand, and kept fighting. Another Marine saw his teammate injured and did not hesitate, moving forward to provide covering fire while the wounded soldier fell back. The depot fell in 40 minutes. Confederation casualties were minimal because the humans had not come to kill everyone. They secured the supplies, disabled the defensive systems, and withdrew efficiently. But the psychological impact was profound. If humans could breach a hardened military position that quickly, nowhere was truly safe. Back on the Perseverance, Harris reviewed after-action reports with satisfaction. Human forces had conducted 37 raids across 8 systems in 2 weeks. Confederation supply lines were disrupted, their defensive positions were constantly on alert, and their forces were exhausted from maintaining combat readiness without rest. They evolved on stable garden worlds, Harris explained to his staff during a briefing. Their biology requires regular rest cycles. Their psychology is not adapted to constant stress. But we evolved in an environment where predators could attack at any time, where natural disasters struck without warning. We are used to living on the edge. The strategy was not to destroy the Confederation military. That would take years and cost human lives Harris was not willing to spend. Instead, the strategy was to make the war unsustainable. Keep Confederation forces off balance, strike where they were weak, and never give them the set-piece battle they wanted. It was persistence hunting applied to interstellar warfare. In the Confederation capital, War Minister Galvin studied casualty reports and resource assessments with growing alarm. They had not lost the war in any traditional sense. Most of their fleet remained intact, and their industrial capacity far exceeded human capabilities. But morale was collapsing. Soldiers feared deployment. Crews reported stress reactions that interfered with performance. Supply officers could not guarantee deliveries because human raiders struck shipments unpredictably. "They are breaking us without defeating us," Galvin said to intelligence officer Rella. "This is not how warfare is supposed to function." Rella pulled up historical data from Earth, showing conflicts that had lasted years, decades, even generations. Humans had fought wars where victory came not from destroying the enemy, but from making continued conflict too costly to sustain. They called it attrition warfare, and it required a species willing to endure suffering longer than their opponents. "We need to end this," Galvin said. "Open backdoor channels to Admiral Harris, see if they will negotiate." On the Perseverance, Harris received the message with mixed feelings. He took no pleasure in hunting sentient beings, even ones who had attacked human colonies. But he also understood that showing mercy too early would be seen as weakness. Humans needed to demonstrate that attacking them was not just difficult but genuinely terrifying. "Tell them we will consider negotiations," Harris replied. "But first, we need to make sure they understand what it means to fight." "A species from Earth." He turned to his tactical staff. "Prepare the operation we have been holding in reserve. It is time to show the Confederation what happens when you really make humans angry." High Commander Draxus assembled his remaining forces for what he called the Hammer Strike. 3 systems with significant human presence would face simultaneous attack by overwhelming force. No more defensive operations or garrison duties. The Confederation would bring its full military might to bear and crush human resistance through sheer numerical superiority. The primary target was Settlers Point, a mining colony in the frontier reaches. Intelligence suggested 40,000 human colonists supported by only 6 military vessels. Draxus committed 80 warships and 12,000 ground troops to the assault. It would be the decisive battle that restored Confederation prestige. What Draxus did not account for was that humans had been preparing. Settlers Point was not a soft target. The mining operations had provided raw materials for extensive defensive construction. Human engineers, working with the ruthless efficiency their species displayed when survival was at stake, had converted the colony into a fortress. Weapons platforms ringed the settlement, minefields covered approach vectors, and the colonists themselves had drilled for exactly this scenario. When the Confederation fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they found a system ready for war. Admiral Harris had positioned defense groups in depth, using the system's asteroid belt and debris fields to create kill zones where human weapons had maximum advantage. The 6 military vessels were supported by 20 armed civilian ships, their cargo holds replaced with missile tubes and railgun batteries. Every adult colonist had a weapon and a fighting position. The battle began with long-range missile exchanges. Confederation ships, expecting to sweep aside minimal resistance, instead found themselves dodging swarms of independently targeted projectiles. Human missiles used cold launch technology, making them nearly invisible until they activated their drives at close range. Several Confederation cruisers took hits before their point defense systems could respond. "Close to effective weapons range," Draxus ordered. "We will overpower them with energy weapons where our technology advantage is greatest." But closing range played directly into human strategy. The asteroid belt became a 3-dimensional battlefield where human ships used cover while Confederation vessels exposed themselves trying to maintain formation. Kinetic weapons, simple but devastatingly effective, punched through shields designed to disperse energy. Railgun projectiles traveling at significant percentages of light speed did not care about advanced technology. On the ground, Confederation forces landed expecting frightened civilians. Instead, they encountered a population that had grown up hearing stories of New Horizon. Every colonist knew that surrendering to invaders was not guaranteed safety. Earth's history was full of conquered peoples and broken promises. Better to fight. Squad leader Torin commanded a unit tasked with securing a mining facility. His soldiers advanced in proper formation, using combined arms tactics refined over centuries. Then the explosions started. Humans had booby-trapped everything. Entry points collapsed. Equipment exploded when tampered with. Hidden snipers fired from positions that should have been impossible to reach. Torin watched his squad take casualties from traps that used mining explosives, industrial equipment, and improvised weapons that violated every expectation of civilian behavior. "They are not combatants," one of his soldiers protested after narrowly avoiding a triggered cave-in. "Why are civilians fighting like soldiers?" Torin understood, though he wished he did not. On Earth, everyone was a potential combatant because Earth never stopped trying to kill its inhabitants. Humans did not have the luxury of separating civilian and military roles when survival was at stake. Children learned to fight predators, survive disasters, and endure hardships that would traumatize most species. By the time they reached adulthood, every human was a survivor. In orbit, the battle intensified. Confederation ships pressed their attack, taking losses but maintaining pressure through numerical superiority. Human vessels fought with the desperation of cornered animals, accepting damage that should have forced withdrawal. One human destroyer, its hull breached and engines failing, deliberately rammed a Confederation cruiser rather than allow it to bombard the surface. Both ships were destroyed, but the human crew had considered it an acceptable trade. Captain Reed, commanding a marine company on the surface, coordinated defense from command post deep in the mining tunnels. His screens showed Confederation forces slowly advancing through the colony despite heavy resistance. Human casualties were mounting, but so were enemy losses. Every street was contested. Every building became a fortress. "They will overwhelm us eventually," his second-in-command observed. "We are buying time, but time for what?" Reed checked his tactical display. "Reinforcements from Earth are 3 days out. We just need to hold until then, and make sure the Confederation pays such a high price that they think twice before attacking any human world again." That was the lesson Earth had taught its children. Sometimes victory was not about winning, but about making the cost of fighting you too high to sustain. Predators learned to avoid prey that fought back too effectively. Humans had survived on Earth by being more trouble than they were worth to their enemies. The battle for Settlers Point lasted 5 days. When it finally ended, Confederation forces held the colony, but at catastrophic cost. They had lost 32 warships and 4,000 soldiers. The human population had taken 60% casualties, but the survivors remained defiant. Wounded humans continued fighting until physically unable to hold weapons. Captured humans refused interrogation with a stubbornness that baffled their captors. War Minister Galvin, observing remotely, felt something he had not experienced in his entire military career: genuine fear. Not fear of death, which was an abstract concept for species evolved in safe environments, but fear of an enemy that could not be broken through conventional means. Intelligence officer Rella provided the analysis Galvin already knew. They evolved on a world where surrender meant death. Their psychology does not include giving up as a survival strategy. Earth taught them that the only way to survive was to fight until the threat was eliminated or you died trying. In his command ship, Draxus celebrated the victory while ignoring the casualty reports. He had proven that Confederation forces could defeat humans through superior numbers. The fact that it required 10-to-1 odds and resulted in massive casualties was irrelevant to his narrative. But squad leader Torin, evacuating with the remnants of his unit, carried a different understanding. As his transport lifted away from Settlers Point, he looked back at the ruined colony. Humans were already emerging from shelters, beginning the work of rebuilding before their dead were even properly buried. That was when Torin truly understood what terrified him about Deathworlders. They did not just survive hardship, they thrived on it. Earth had tried to kill humanity for millions of years and failed. The Confederation's attempt would fare no better. The Confederation Council met in emergency session as casualty reports from Settlers Point joined a growing list of military disasters. In 8 months of warfare, they had lost 112 warships, taken 17,000 casualties, and spent resources equivalent to a decade of normal military operations. Meanwhile, human resistance showed no signs of weakening. War Minister Galvin stood before the council, no longer the confident commander who had promised swift victory. "We are winning battles but losing the war. Every engagement costs us more than we anticipated. Our soldiers are exhausted. Morale is collapsing, and the humans continue fighting with intensity that defies rational analysis." High Commander Draxus, attending remotely, rejected that assessment. "We have superior technology and numbers. What we lack is proper commitment. Increase military production. Mobilize reserve forces. We will crush them through attrition." Intelligence Officer Rella projected casualty comparisons on the holographic display. "With respect, Commander, attrition favors the humans. They have smaller forces but replace losses more efficiently. Their industrial capacity is entirely focused on war production, while ours must support civilian populations unaccustomed to hardship. More significantly, they are psychologically adapted to sustained conflict, while our species are not." She brought up psychological profiles of combat veterans returning from human space. Depression, anxiety, stress disorders that most Confederation species had never experienced before encountering humans. Soldiers trained for orderly warfare found themselves facing an enemy that treated combat as natural as breathing. "Earth is not just their homeworld," Rella explained. "It is a training ground that never stops testing them. Every human grows up facing challenges that would hospitalize our citizens. By the time they join their military, they have already survived conditions we would consider combat situations. We are not fighting soldiers. We are fighting an entire species that evolved as warriors." Galvin made his recommendation formal. "We should negotiate immediate peace terms, return captured territory, pay reparations if required, and establish formal boundaries. Continuing this war serves no strategic purpose." Draxus rejected the motion. The council split evenly, deadlocked between those who recognized reality and those who could not accept defeat by a supposedly primitive species. In the end, politics trumped military wisdom. Draxus assumed direct control of all combat operations, promising final victory through one massive assault. Admiral Harris received intelligence about the planned Confederation offensive through intercepted communications. Draxus intended to commit every available warship to a direct attack on humanity's forward naval base at Fort Stevens. It would be the largest space battle in Confederation history, and Draxus believed overwhelming force would finally break human resistance. Harris called a meeting of his senior commanders. Around the table sat veterans of every major engagement in the war, men and women whose faces showed the strain of months of combat. Unlike Confederation forces, humans could sustain prolonged warfare, but that did not make it easy or pleasant. "They are coming with everything they have," Harris explained, displaying fleet projections. 400 warships against our 80 vessels at Fort Stevens. On paper, we cannot win." Captain Reed, promoted after his defense of Settlers Point, studied the tactical display. "Then we do not fight on paper, we fight the way Earth taught us." The plan Harris outlined was risky even by human standards. Fort Stevens sat near a binary star system with unstable solar activity. Periodic stellar flares created radiation zones that most species avoided. The humans would use those zones as both cover and weapons. When Draxus's armada arrived at Fort Stevens, they found the human fleet waiting in what appeared to be a suicide position. The human ships floated between the two stars, positioned where they would be caught in the crossfire of any attack. Standard Confederation doctrine would have surrounded them, used long-range weapons, and accepted the time required for a methodical victory. Draxus ordered an immediate frontal assault. He wanted overwhelming victory, the the kind of decisive battle that would end human resistance through sheer demonstration of power. The Confederation fleet advanced in 3 massive waves, confident that numbers would prevail. The human fleet did not retreat. Instead, they timed their counterattack to coincide with a predicted stellar flare. When the binary stars released their synchronized burst of radiation and electromagnetic energy, human ships dove into the chaos while Confederation vessels scattered to avoid system failures. In the radiation storm, human ships fought like predators in their natural element. Their crews, protected by redundant shielding and medical countermeasures developed for Earth's harsh environment, remained functional while Confederation crews struggled with equipment failures and radiation sickness. Kinetic weapons fired through the electromagnetic interference, finding targets whose sensors could not detect the incoming projectiles. The battle lasted 14 hours, longer than any previous engagement. Confederation forces took staggering losses as human vessels used terrain, timing, and pure aggression to offset their numerical disadvantage. When a second stellar flare threatened to overwhelm even human countermeasures, both fleets withdrew to safe distance. Draxus stared at casualty reports showing 87 ships destroyed or disabled. His Grand Armada had been reduced to a retreating fleet of damaged vessels and traumatized crews. Across from Fort Stevens, human losses were proportionally higher, but their remaining ships were already maneuvering for another engagement. The mathematics of attrition had become undeniable. To defeat humanity through military force would require resources the Confederation did not possess and casualties its population would not accept. More significantly, even if they won, occupying human territory would mean facing an eternal insurgency from a species that viewed survival as a competitive sport. War Minister Galvin sent a priority transmission directly to Admiral Harris, bypassing official channels. "We need to end this war. Tell me what terms you require for peace." Harris read the message while standing on the bridge of his battered flagship. Around him, crew members worked to repair damage that would take weeks to fully address. Earth had sent reinforcements, but every ship carried wounded veterans who would never fully recover and families who would never see their loved ones return. "Reply with the following," Harris told his communications officer. "We will. Meet in neutral territory. Both sides come alone, no fleets, no weapons, just 2 species trying to find a way to coexist." Galvin agreed immediately. He understood that humans were offering something remarkable. The chance to end hostilities before one side or both was destroyed completely. It was an opportunity to show that intelligence could overcome instinct, that sentient beings could choose peace even after violence. Squad leader Torin, recovering from his 3rd combat injury, watched news reports of the proposed peace talks with mixed emotions. He had lost friends in this war, seen horrors that would haunt him for whatever remained of his life. But he had also learned something about humans that the Confederation needed to understand. They were not monsters, despite fighting like demons. They were survivors who had learned to be ferocious because Earth offered no alternative. And perhaps, if given the choice, they would prefer to build rather than destroy. The neutral station hung in unclaimed space, a small habitat constructed specifically for the peace negotiations. War Minister Galvin arrived alone, his transport escorted only by automated systems. Across the docking bay, Admiral Harris emerged from a human shuttle that bore the scars of recent combat, patched hull plating visible against newer metal. They met in a simple conference room, neither side attempting intimidation through displays of power. Galvin studied the human admiral, noting the lines of exhaustion in his face and the slight tremor in his hands that suggested stimulant use to maintain combat readiness. Harris showed the same signs of prolonged stress that Galvin had seen in his own commanders. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Galvin began. "I want to be direct. The Confederation cannot sustain this war without destroying our economy and demoralizing our population beyond recovery. We made a terrible mistake attacking your species." Harris nodded slowly. We have the capacity to continue fighting, but every battle costs lives we cannot truly replace. Earth sent its best to defend our colonies. Many will never return home. Their families deserve peace more than we deserve revenge. The honesty surprised Galvin. He had expected humans to demand crushing terms, to extract maximum advantage from their military position. Instead, Harris presented reasonable requirements: return of all captured territory, reparations for destroyed infrastructure, and a formal non-aggression treaty with clearly defined borders. "That is all?" Galvin asked. "You could demand much more. Our military is broken. Our political leadership is in disarray. You have leverage to impose harsh terms." Harris smiled without humor. "My species learned a long time ago that crushing defeated enemies creates future wars. We would rather have neighbors we can eventually trust than subjects who will rebel at the first opportunity. Besides, we studied your culture during this conflict. You are not naturally aggressive. You made mistakes based on insufficient information and arrogance, not genuine malice." Over the following hours, they negotiated details. Confederation forces would withdraw from human space within 90 days. Reparations would be paid in resources rather than currency, with humans directing reconstruction of damaged colonies. Both species would establish embassies and begin cultural exchange programs designed to prevent future misunderstandings. "There is one condition I must insist upon," Harris added. "Your schools need to teach about Earth, not as propaganda, but accurate information about what Deathworlds produce. If your people understand where we come from, they will be less likely to underestimate us or any other species from hostile environments." Galvin agreed without hesitation. The war had taught the Confederation a lesson they would not forget, but institutional memory required formal education. Future generations needed to understand that technological advancement did not equate to evolutionary superiority. Intelligence Officer Rella met with Dr. Yuki, the human medical officer from New Horizon, to coordinate humanitarian efforts. They had developed an unlikely friendship through prisoner exchanges, discovering that compassion existed on both sides despite the violence. "We are establishing medical training programs," Yuki explained. "Human doctors will teach Confederation physicians about treating combat trauma. Your species never developed those skills because you never needed them. That made this war even more devastating for your people." Rella appreciated the gesture. "And what can we offer in return?" Yuki smiled. "Teach us about your gardens. Earth is beautiful, but it is also exhausting. Your species creates peaceful environments through technology and artistry. Humans could benefit from learning how to build spaces that nurture rather than challenge." The cultural exchange went both ways. Confederation scientists wanted to study human biology and psychology, not for military advantage, but genuine academic curiosity. How did a species survive on a world that seemed designed to prevent intelligent life? Human researchers reciprocated, fascinated by species that evolved in harmony with their environments rather than constant struggle. Squad leader Torin found himself assigned to the exchange program, teaching at a human military academy about Confederation tactics and perspectives. His students were veterans, many carrying injuries from battles where Torin had fought on the opposite side. The first day was awkward, former enemies trying to find common ground. "You were at Settler's Point," one student observed, recognizing Torin from combat footage. "You led the assault on the northern mining facility." Torin nodded, expecting hostility. Instead, the human offered a respectful salute. "You fought well, cost us good people taking that position, but you pulled back when you saw civilians trapped in the collapse, saved lives on both sides." That memory had haunted Torin, the moment when he defied orders to allow human civilians to evacuate before resuming the assault. He had considered it a basic moral requirement. The humans considered it evidence that Confederation soldiers were not monsters, just beings caught in a terrible situation. Captain Reed, now a liaison officer in the diplomatic corps, worked with former adversaries to establish protocols for future interactions. His counterpart was a Confederation officer who had fought at Fort Stevens, and they spent hours comparing experiences and lessons learned. "Your species fights like cornered predators," the Confederation officer observed. "No surrender, no retreat. It is terrifying." Reed nodded. "And your species coordinates like a single organism, perfect formations, synchronized movements. On Earth, that only exists in insect colonies. It is equally terrifying to us because we cannot predict individual initiative within your collective action." Understanding replaced hostility. Both species recognized that they saw the universe through fundamentally different evolutionary lenses. Humans viewed survival as individual achievement within cooperative frameworks. Confederation species viewed survival as collective effort that required perfect synchronization. Neither approach was wrong, they were simply different adaptations to different environments. Months passed. Human colonies rebuilt with Confederation assistance. Former combat zones became sites of cooperation as engineers from both species worked together. Children on Confederation worlds learned about Earth in their classes, watching recordings of hurricanes and earthquakes with the same fascination humans showed for stable garden worlds. Admiral Harris and War Minister Galvin met again, this time at the dedication of a memorial on New Horizon. The monument listed every casualty from both sides, human and Confederation names together, acknowledging that war claimed victims regardless of species. "We should never have fought," Galvin said quietly. "The waste of life, the suffering, all of it unnecessary." Harris placed a hand on the memorial stone. "But we did fight, and now we must ensure the lessons justify the cost. The galaxy needs to understand that diversity includes Deathworlders, Garden Worlders, and everything between. Technology measures progress, but environment shapes character." In the crowd attending the dedication, Squad Leader Torrin stood beside Captain Reed. Two soldiers who had tried to kill each other now stood as friends, their shared experiences creating bonds that transcended species boundaries. Around them, human and Confederation citizens mingled freely, curious about each other rather than fearful. The memorial's inscription, written in both languages, summarized what they had all learned. "Here rest warriors from two worlds, different in origin but alike in courage. They fought because they did not understand each other. Let those who remember them never repeat that mistake." Earth remained a death world, its environment as hostile as ever. But humanity no longer faced it alone. And the Confederation had learned that the true terror of death worlds was not the violence they produced, but the resilience they fostered. Humans could fight like demons.